It is the care. It's the care squad.
Unmuted. You're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. The December 7th, 2023 regular council meeting is called to order at 4 o'clock. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. I would like to open the meeting by inviting the fire chief up to the podium, please.
Through the mayor, the fire commissioner of the province of BC is responsible for the administration and enforcement of the Fire Services Act and the BC Fire Code. Local assistants of the fire commissioner are appointed within local governments to assist the fire commissioner in the administration of fire legislation. The Fire Services Act designates local assistants of the fire commissioner as peace officers for the purpose of upholding the act. Recently, Deputy Chief McCurry completed the required training and designation process required to be appointed as a local assistant of the fire commissioner. It's my honor today, along with Mayor McEwen, to designate Deputy Chief McCurry as local assistant of the fire commissioner for the District of Ucluelet and to present him with LAFC badge number 3240. By accepting the badge, Deputy Chief McCurry is obligated to carry out the responsibilities of an LAFC under the Fire Services Act and act in accordance with the powers given to the LAFC for the purposes of the Fire Services Act. So, Madam Mayor and Deputy Chief, if I could ask you to join me up front, please.
There are two late items. A staff report titled Consultant Contract Authorization for Development Cost Charges Program Review and Update, and the October and November 2023 monthly Ucluelet Detachment Policing Reports. Has Council received these items?
Yes.
I move that the late item titled October and November 2023 monthly Ucluelet Detachment Policing Reports be added to the agenda under our first delegation by Sergeant Jones, and the staff report titled Consultant Contract Authorization for Development Cost Charges Program Review and Update be added to the agenda as report item 6.2. Could I have a seconder?
One second.
Councillor Kennington. All in favor? None opposed, that carries. And I move that the agenda be reordered to move the report item titled 221 Monado Road Park Dedication, License of Occupation and Covenant Amendment to report item 6.6 and renumber the agenda accordingly. Could I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, all in favor? None opposed, and that carries. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington,
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, all in favor? None opposed, that carries. We have 3 delegations scheduled for this meeting. Section 8.3 of the procedure bylaw limits the number of delegations to 2 per meeting. I therefore move that Section 18.3 of the council procedure bylaw be temporarily suspended to allow 3 delegations at this meeting. Could I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson, all in favour? None opposed, that carries. If the delegates could please limit your presentations to 10 minutes. The first delegate is Ucluelet RCMP, Detachment Sergeant Jones. The floor is yours. Welcome.
We can hear okay? Good, thanks, sorry. You look very busy again, so I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. I've sent out both reports. I apologize for being a little late getting them out. I unfortunately was away for November. My son actually graduated as an RCMP member, so he's now posted in Prince Rupert, so I was over there dealing with that. Mostly, we seem to be fairly good on track, statistically speaking, and I'm somewhat okay with some of the stats here that show that we should probably come out a little lower for our total file count from last year, which is nice. I will say, though, that given the complexities of policing now, members are expected to invest more time in certain types of investigations, requiring warrants, different things. So I see our time getting utilized for that. Overall, like I said, everything seems to be pretty much normal. There's nothing really outstanding, with the exception of the mental health situations. When we deal with mental health calls, we all know they're very high-risk calls. We don't particularly find these. They're very time-consuming, and they're obviously very emotionally charged and such. So, I've been encouraging the members, and I've been seeing an increase in use of community resources. We have a resource card with some 1-800 numbers for mental health, for addictions. They're all sort of tied hand in hand. So, I think this is kind of indicative of the whole province in general. Like, I don't think there's a shortage of mental health calls. They've come to the forefront, but just something I think that the mayor and council should be aware that these are things that we are dealing with, and there is a substantial number of them, but nothing that's sort of egregious at this point. But aside from that, some other positives. Our victim services is being highly utilized. I'm very happy to see that lots of referrals been coming through. Our victim services have been working with different people that we come in contact with, so those are very positive. And overall, I think probably because we won't be, I won't get an opportunity to speak again until sometime in the new year. It looks like the coming end of the year, we should be pretty much on a pretty good note. I don't think there's anything that's going to really stand out and cause any major issues.
That's great. Last time you were presenting to us, you were looking for volunteers for the cells. Did you manage to find some?
So we're looking for employment for guards, and I have had a couple people approach, which was really nice. I'm still trying to promote the volunteer programs within the community. We're hoping to still get some participation there. I understand it's not always easy. Not everybody wants to, but we're still promoting it. And I was lucky enough to have Andrew from the newspaper come in and did a little thing with us as well. So I'm always hopeful that somebody will help participate with us.
Great. Any questions for the sergeant? Well, congratulations on your son graduating as RCMP,
Yes.
and thank you for your report.
Right, thank you. And if I don't see you, hope you guys all have a great Christmas and a good New Year.
Same to you as well.
Take care. Thank you.
The next delegate is Ekistics Town Planning Incorporated, Mr. Rosano. The floor is yours. Welcome.
This clicker works. So thank you, Your Worship, and council, and also a thank you to senior staff. We've kind of been working on this project now for I think a year and a half, and have gotten great feedback, through those months from Dwayne and Bruce and James, and have appreciated the time that they've spent with us trying to really understand and discover not just High Focus Island, but also Ucluelet and kind of the corridor that your municipality sits within.
If you could just speak right into the microphone, please.
Okay. So I'll try to be as brief as I can. I'll try to click through this presentation. First of all, we'd also like to recognize that we're on the unceded territory of the Ukiulet people. I do want to mention that we have been having meetings with First Nations. In fact, we'd hope to have a meeting with the band elders this week. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen, and we'll be doing that early in the new year. But we've been closely working with their kind of operations team, and in particular Carrie, in terms of doing archaeological work on the site, and we really appreciate the time that they've also spent with us. The land that we just wanted to talk about tonight is lot 543. It's the southern portion of High Focus Island, or as the First Nations call it, Humanis. It was purchased by our client in 2022. He owns other pieces of land on Vancouver Island in Nanu's. He owns a small marina and some apartments up in Port Hardy. He fell in love with this property and kind of wanted to purchase it for not only his family but also for land development purposes, and contacted our company in Vancouver, and we've been helping with it ever since. I think the purpose of our presentation tonight was largely just to introduce our project. We have had a chance to meet with most of the council members and with Your Worship, the Mayor. So I think none of this will come as a big surprise. We're not asking for anything in particular this evening other than to be able to proceed with kind of taking our concept to the public early in the new year, and to begin going through the process of getting public feedback on some of the ideas that we have for the island. I think you all know the island well. It's around 34 acres, about 1,200 meters of coastline, really interested, kind of varied topography and vegetation, and of course within walking distance of the school, and with shops and other essential services in Ukiulet. It's a very interesting history, of course, on the island. Of course, it was being used by the First Nations people for fishing and shelter and burial, as we've discovered through some of our archaeological work. Of course, in the late 60s and early 70s, the island was largely logged and pretty much clear-cut, as you can see from some of those photos. And then, of course, later on, there was a causeway built to the island, and a sanitary sewer main and lagoons that were constructed in and around 1984. Of course, originally there was just a small pedestrian bridge that connected the island to the mainland. That changed in 1967 when the causeway was built. And we've certainly heard lots of feedback from both the First Nations and from Redfish about a strong desire to try to open up that channel again, which I'm sure you guys have also probably heard for a number of years. We just wanted to kind of bracket our presentation kind of with three objectives. I think you've had a chance to maybe read some of these, so I'll try to be very brief. First of all, as we've been going through our design exercise, we're really trying to focus on responding to Ukiulet's housing shortage. Of course, due to the popularity of both Ukiulet and Tofino, and kind of the happenings of COVID, I think really caused people to focus and start falling in love with these more remote communities, and you've probably seen that maybe more than any small community in BC. Our proposal is to try to address some of those housing shortages, particularly in the affordable and attainable range. We've developed plans that range anywhere from a couple hundred units to 320 units of rental apartments, townhouses, duplexes, with a priority on trying to provide housing for people that live and work in Ukiulet, not for tourists. And we are working hard to align our proposal to kind of meet that target 75% of attainable housing, which is outlined in your OCP. Of course, another objective we have is in the infrastructure realm, particularly trying to to propose a development that has high quality infrastructure in the way of roads, sidewalks, trails, water, and sanitary. As part of our proposal, as it starts to unveil itself in the new year, that would, of course, involve an upgrading of Helen Road and the access to the site, extending the Safe Harbor Trail, and ensuring a kind of a seamless integration of new development with some of the existing kind of sanitary work that that James is so familiar with out on that island. And we do have an engineering company out of Victoria that is actively engaged and working on a study right now to try to help us understand and to deal with the odor issue that exists on High Focus Island today. The third objective, of course, is an environmental one, trying to preserve as much of the natural character and the somewhat mature growth and sensitive ecosystems that exist on the site. We've had Redfish do a study of the island. They've done a fairly detailed inventory, of which we're also incorporating into our planning work. And although up there it says preserving 20 to 30%, it's now closing in on 50% of land that would be preserved in its forested state as part of our proposal. And of course, high priority for us is trying to maintain as much of the character and particularly the edge conditions of the island as they exist today. I'm sure council is familiar with both the OCP and the zoning on the site. The OCP does call for some single-family development. I think High Focus has always been deemed as being an extension of development from kind of the mainland, if we can call it that. Of course, our proposed land uses, I think, extend somewhat beyond what was envisioned in the OCP, and we'll be talking about that a little bit tonight, and of course, into the new year as we begin to kind of fine tune the plan. Existing zoning on the site, of course, is rural residential, and we would likely be proposing a comprehensive development zone as part of our proposal, with a number of fairly complex zones that may or may not fit nicely into your existing zoning bylaw. Anyone that's walked out there knows the site. It's fairly steep on the edges. It's more gentle, kind of in the middle. It kind of rises to a peak in the center of the island. And of course, our plan envisions staying away from all lands kind of beyond 30% slope. We have worked closely, as I was saying earlier, with Kerry Cunningworth and his team doing archaeological work on the site. We've spent a few days with him tromping around out there. Redfish has been working on identifying kind of environmental sensitive areas and kind of ecological corridors, and all of that work is being carefully inventoried and incorporated into all of our planning work. Some of the initial designs that we've probably shown a number of staff and counselors as this has kind of evolved over the last number of months include compact, kind of cohesive neighborhoods, really trying to have an integrated, diverse set of housing types, from single-family lots along the edge of the island to much smaller compact and duplex lots in the middle, some townhouse units as probably narrow and affordable as we can make them, and also an apartment building that would be a rental project in the center of the island. And we have been exploring and have kind of gone back and forth on the notion of a very small kind of boutique hotel kind of on that southern tip of, say, 20 or so units. Just a very simple land use plan, including kind of parks and open space, which, if you look at both our roads and open space systems, exceed 50% of the site. And then just generally where the kind of the ground-oriented residential units would be located, the apartment complex and the boutique hotel. And then an expansion of the trails systems coming out and onto the island, and how we would plan to integrate those kind of throughout our development pockets. We had included some images in here. I mean, it's very early on, but in general, we're proposing single-family homes, relatively compact, some duplex units, townhouses, similar to what we're doing in other kind of more remote communities around BC. One apartment rental building in the center of our site, and perhaps some small commercial units that would be a component of that. And then, still playing with this notion, the owner would really like to develop this project himself, a very small boutique hotel out on that point that is kind of at the farthest southeastern point of the island, and again, some character images of what that might look like. Again, I think in summary, we are pushing hard to meet those 3 objectives that I had mentioned earlier on, coming up with a master plan that provides benefits to the district that are much needed, as we understand, trying to help address some of the local housing needs. And I know there are other projects that are currently being proposed and on the books and close to development that are also trying to hit that kind of that affordability index, looking at how to improve on some of Ucluelet's infrastructure, particularly trying to deal with some of the sanitary sewer issues that exist out on the island, and then, of course, safeguarding the environment through dedications of parks and trails and expanding that network out and encompassing Humanis. So our last slide really is just kind of where we are. We've been working on this now for, I think, a little over a year. I think we feel that we're at a point now that we're starting to wrap up our civil engineering work, our archaeological, traffic, and environmental studies that we'd like to move forward with, having some public information meetings early in the new year. And then, hopefully being able to respond to kind of local comments and needs. And then, sometime, following that, putting together an application to the district and beginning to run a rezoning and OCP amendment through the proper channels. I think we just wanted kind of this to be our announcement of the project, although I think most of you know about it, just formally saying I think we're ready to go. And, I can try to answer whatever questions you might have tonight, but would just preclude that by saying that a number of our studies are still kind of being wrapped up. And early in the new year, we should have a full set of technical documents that can support our master plan as we move into kind of public information meetings. So thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting this evening.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Anderson?
When it says 300 to 350 units, and then underneath it's plus or minus 100 rental apartments, or plus or minus 150 townhouses and duplexes. So is it 350 units in total, and then of those?
Yeah, so of the 300, and again, we've had schemes that range from 200 to I think as much as 325. But let's say of those 325 or 350, we're looking at approximately 150 apartment units, around 100 townhouse units, and then the very small majority of that being single-family homes of a whole variety of sizes, but within that 300 to 350.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any consideration for the new legislation that would allow 6 units per single family lot, and what that would do to capacity and the overall unit count?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to be frank. In almost all the municipalities that we're working now, particularly on Vancouver Island and up in the Okanagan, we're being instructed by staff and council in communities like Kelowna and Vernon and Lake Country to push the density, not to pull it back. And that's that's something that, frankly, we haven't been used to hearing over the last 20 years, and I think that's really pressure that's coming down from the province. I know in some of the projects we're doing in Squamish right now, we're now doing townhouses that are 4.5 meters wide, 3 stories tall, like really trying to be as efficient with land use as possible, all in the name of trying to create a more affordable home. Construction prices, of course, haven't cooperated since COVID, as they've continued to skyrocket. And I imagine that one of the questions that we might get tonight is like, how can you build affordable housing these days, given construction prices? One of them is density, and I think the other one is, we're seriously exploring kind of putting together our own construction company, trying to create at least a critical mass of units that we could afford to have a team working here in order to try to help bring our cost per square foot down to the point that is actually affordable, and that is a huge challenge. We are definitely in other municipalities. In Vancouver now we're taking 33-foot by 132-foot lots and figuring out ways to do sixplexes on those very small parcels of land in well-established single-family neighborhoods throughout the city. And the city of Vancouver is pushing us hard to explore, new and different ways of doing that. So I think it's something that as we begin to kind of fine-tune the plan, I can see our units getting smaller. I can see them getting more compact as we begin to kind of crunch numbers to try to reach that 75% affordability index.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you're looking at assembling a construction crew. Do you currently not have one? You're relying on local construction crews?
I mean, I think from everything we've heard about building either here or in Tofino, there is definitely not enough, there's not enough contractors here to be able to accommodate, I think, what we're hoping to be able to do when we get our rezoning and subdivision applications through. The owner and our team have had a whole variety of discussions about essentially creating their own construction company and then trying to figure out a way to get, a larger team kind of here during construction season to not have to necessarily go out to all the trades, to be able to do, in particular, I think our apartment and townhouse buildings, which we'll have to build ourselves. Currently, we're not doing that with this particular individual, but I think we believe it's probably the only way that we're going to be able to get the kind of building built that we want from a quality perspective and have it kind of meet that affordability number.
Thank you. And would you tend to build the higher density units first, or would it be in conjunction with some of the single family homes?
In a perfect world, I think we've seen some of the precedents here, and the emphasis on trying to get affordable units kind of onto the market as quickly as possible. To be frank, from an economic perspective, we're hoping that we can do them simultaneous. Even if it's only a limited number of single-family homes, maybe 10 or 15 that would be in conjunction with the first apartment building going up would definitely help us, I think, from a cash flow perspective. I'm assuming that that's something that we'll probably need to negotiate with your staff, as we start working through the technical details. But from a developer's perspective, and again, I'm not a developer, I'm a designer, but we've been at this for 33 years here in BC, and the more that we can bring a variety of products onto the market at the same time, in terms of a single family lot, a duplex, the first pot of townhouses and apartment building, you're now kind of hitting different segments of the market, and your absorption moves faster, So in fact, the economic numbers work better and actually make the units therefore more affordable. So it does make sense from a development perspective, but I can understand the district also wanting to make sure that that you're not just doing single family lots and ignoring the promise of the affordability units as part of that picture. So we would hope that we're able to negotiate kind of a build out that allows us to do kind of all product types simultaneous with some limits.
Great, that makes sense. Any other questions from council?
Yeah, I have one.
Councillor Kennington?
Is the intention to actually build the single-family units, or is the intention to sell lots?
So I think that the intention right now would be on the waterfront single-family lots to actually sell those to end users and to allow them to build them themselves, as they can afford to do it under some sort of an architectural building scheme. But any of the attached product, from the duplex to the townhouse to the apartments, the intention right now is for us to build those ourselves.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we look forward to the open house in January, perhaps, you
Yes.
think? Yeah.
Hope so.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Rosenau.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
And last but not least, our last delegate is Tourism Ucluelet. The floor is yours, Ms. Dice Norman.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's okay. Saves me from going next slide.
I got 2 cases in my car.
Okay. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for having me this evening for me to present Tourism Ucluelet's 2024 tactical plan. Oh, there we go. Okay. So who is Tourism Ucluelet and what is our role within the community? So Tourism Ucluelet has been established since 2009, and it is constructed of a 10-member board of directors as well as 2 representatives and an executive director with their staff as well. Our role within the community is to provide to support all small business and tourism development within, the tourism sector within the community, to provide a flourishing business community to support the community as well. We became a destination management organization, shifting gears from a marketing organization a few years ago, in awareness that bringing people to the community is not just solely about bringing visitors here and marketing it as a place to visit, but also the responsibility of managing the expectation of visitors and supporting the community in the needs that they have as well, and support and maintaining that balance of the tourist economy as well as a thriving community for the locals to live. In the last few years, Tourism Ucluelet, especially since COVID, but prior to that, has really focused and assessed what its future aspirations are as an organization and the way that we interact and support the community. A few years ago, the board went through a full rebrand as well as a new visioning statement, and along with the tourism master plan that was devised last year, redefined its purpose. And over the next 5 years, Tourism Ucluelet would like to lead Ucluelet's vibrant and sustainable tourism industry through industry collaboration, respect and authentic promotion, visitor and community education, support for the community priorities, and accountability in our operations. And not that Tourism Ucluelet hadn't done that in the past, but this way we were putting our actions down on paper so so the community as well as our partners could see that as the tourism economy in Ucluelet grows and flourishes, we do have intent to support the community as it develops as well. "2023. Well, what can I say? It's definitely been a year to remember. I think the challenges that were presented to the community during COVID were certainly there, and the tourism community is, as well as the rest of the community, are still recovering from the effects of COVID by managing their businesses, keeping staff, and a lot of the other challenges that have come with that. But this past year, the Cameron Lake wildfires were definitely an eye-opener in the impact to our local economy. While there were alternate routes to get in and out of town, having the road blocked for such an extended period of time, while the community was never in imminent danger, which we were all grateful for, the impacts of having the highway closed for as long as it was, as well as the continued closures throughout the course of the summer, created detrimental effects to the businesses within the community, which also in turn affected the locals, because it comes down to groceries, it comes down to maintaining staff, it comes down to providing viable employment opportunities for locals throughout the year. And when the highway reopened on August 31st, we were definitely grateful for that, but the impacts had already been felt by our businesses, as while the summer has certainly been, we've always been quite busy during the summer, and there is this artificial inflated sense of busyness just coming out of COVID, because people were still limited as to where they could travel. They were still apprehensive to travel. The fact that 2023, as well as we saw in 2022, people had choice again, which is why I put it feels like 2017, because this past year we've really seen that pre-COVID ebb and flow of travel to the area. I think the last few years have created this artificial sense of busyness in town, because there were compounding factors around that prevented people from traveling elsewhere. They were using up things. They were trying to just feel somewhat, to a better lack of a term, normal again, which is why we saw so many people here shortly after we were allowed to travel again. And what we were starting to notice last year was the brand integrity of the community. While people in general have, costs in general have gone up, it's definitely been interesting to see that now that choice has returned, markets and people who had the ability and capacity to travel when and where they wanted to are choosing other locations that their dollar will either go further, or if they're going to be paying top dollar, they will go to locations that it is kind of more afforded of what the expectation is when you're paying a higher rate to stay someplace overnight. And so from some of the challenges that our businesses have noted with regards to general, sorry, I'm just gonna turn that off, just kind of recovering again from inflated costs, recovery and the challenges of just dealing with people having choice again. It was one of the reasons why you see in there under the recap statement for stakeholder development that we actually ran revenue management workshops for our accommodation providers as an opportunity to understand what the market overall was dictating. And we did have a good turnout for that. It would have been nicer to have more there, but it's definitely something that when you look at the incident, Cameron Lake, how the media managed that entire conversation, reeling and trying to recover from COVID. And now you're back in this market of dealing with inflation, opportunity, and flexibility to do what you want. it's starting to see those ebbs and flows of what tourism used to look like in Ucluelet. So it might be busy during the summer, but as you can tell, it is extremely quiet right now in town. And that also is a repercussion, which is why you see some businesses have actually closed for the season, which normally they haven't. And it's because they want to make sure that they're viable for next year, because they're reeling still from everything that's happened over the last 3 years. And so when I think about the recap for 2023, our community is extremely resilient, and they really know how to pull together and to support one another. But I think that when we look at the recap of what this past year has brought, it really is starting to see those businesses that may have opened shortly after COVID understand what the impact is, because they are here living and breathing and supporting this community, versus, and as well as those that have been around prior to that and grew with tourism over the last 10 to 15 years, versus some that have kind of come and gone because they just saw this inflated area of popularity and thought that it would be a key point to invest, instead of understanding the history and the long-term growth of kind of what tourism is like out on the West Coast. So that was, I know that probably doesn't sound very cheerful, but it is a reality of what this past year has brought and what the last 3 years have really brought to this community, as well as the impacts to the business community as well. Oh, sorry. Wrong button. So, what do we have to look forward to for next year? As Tourism Ucluelet continues to strive towards our goals of sustainability and supporting destination development, one of the things that we are circling back to is one of our original statements. So we had used quite some time prior, of choose to be here. It is a trademark statement that we have, and it is still very much relevant today as it was 8 years ago when we came up with it. And it really is about finding those visitors who do choose to come to Ucluelet. It is off the beaten path. While it is gaining popularity, it is not like other destinations where like you've got tons of amenities and tons of just access to everything. There is something inherently special about this community, and it's finding those visitors who connect with this community and what we have to offer. And so we have inherently found that people intentionally come to Ucluelet because there is something special about it, and it's a family-friendly community to come to. So you'll start to see more of that language in the marketing in months to come, as well as moving forward, but it will still continue to be targeted to those audiences that really do, or the visitors that do connect with what it is that we're trying to achieve as a community, and find that balance and preservation of not just the community itself, but also the natural surroundings that really is what bring people to the area. Oh, okay. All right, apparently I cannot drive the clicker today. And so as we move forward, these were the 5 priority focus areas that came out of the tourism master plan that we worked with the District of Ucluelet on, in order to identify and ensure that as decisions are being made moving forward, that we always keep these 5 focus areas at the forefront of our decision making. And with that, when I say flatten the curve, it's a very busy slide, but there's a lot of goals and aspirations for Tourism Ucluelet moving forward. And ideally, when you talk to our businesses, flattening the curve for them is having 80%, across the board all year round. Because what that does is it gives them flexibility to maintain full-time staff. It actually gives them solid income. It also offers the ability of sustainability just as a small independent business owner, because when you're juggling to make sure you make enough money between the middle of June to the middle of September to keep your staff all year long and not have to lay them off, and then you see these people come and go from the community, thank you so kindly, it also hampers a business perspective as well. And so while 80% does sound like a lot, if you have stable staff, if you have stable housing, if you have stable employment, as well as businesses that can function and operate all year long, you'll have healthier as everybody knows, like you have healthier staff, you have just that ability to function and live, and you're not, as a small business owner, stressed and worried about how you're going to do things in the off season. And so that's sort of where that statement comes from. Obviously, that's not going to happen next year, but those are the goals that we kind of aim and try to aim towards. A large part of what we're trying to do, we have a sustainability committee that is going to be that would like to get out and start talking to the business sector about their needs. Visitor services, this past year we had done our visitor services task force had gone out and collected data about what the future of visitor services and the PRVC will look like, and I know that they're just working through that right now. Digital literacy is always important. Brand awareness and crisis resiliency is always very important for our businesses, which are some of the conversations that the board is also having to see what that looks like long-term for stakeholder development. And just a couple of weeks ago, I'm happy to say that Tourism Ucluelet received a grant from the Indigenous Tourism of BC to work with the Ucluelet government to integrate more Nuu-chah-nulth language throughout the website and commonly used terms, as well as use it as teaching components through our visitor services program as well. And so we'll be working with Melissa Busha and the cultural team at Ucluelet government with Geneva in order to start using some more language and just identifying areas that it makes sense in order to offer those learnings as well. And then, of course, in order to, I just saw the research piece in there. We're also signed up to Environics, which has been a conversation that we've been having for quite some time, not only with the district, but also our neighboring communities, about identifying and pinpointing visitors and areas within the country as well as in the states that really do resonate with what Ucluelet has to offer and has similar values to what the community has as well. And moving forward, as I'm sure council knows by now, this is actually my my last day.
We saw that coming.
As of this afternoon, I am pleased to just inform council and staff of the district that 4VI will be, formerly Tourism Vancouver Island, will be supporting Tourism Ucluelet in a short-term capacity to keep the day-to-day operations going, as well as all of the work that I just showed to you on the previous slide. And until at that time, the board can find a suitable replacement to keep Tourism Ucluelet moving forward in the direction that they intend. Oh, honestly, I need to get a different clicker. Oh. And so, you know, I leave some of these thoughts with everybody in the room, because I know there's been a lot of conversation around what Tourism Ucluelet, or what tourism in general does for the community and as a sector as a whole to the province. It is the largest sector within the province, bringing in the most amount of revenue. But, you know, without tourism, there's also those other components. When you looked at what logging and fishing had done in the community in the past, without tourism within the community, you know, you wouldn't have a healthy economy. We wouldn't have the restaurants that we love, the shops that we shop locally at. The jobs would be affected within the community, and those community members, whether they have been born here and are generational or have just recently moved here to make new lives for themselves, they would go elsewhere to thrive, because they need this environment is, and the community itself, and as long as is all intertwined. And investment goes away if they don't see a thriving economy, even in a small rural community like ours. And so I just, you know, remind everybody, like, tourism and community are integral for both of them to flourish. As we just saw this lovely presentation about future development coming down the pipeline as well. And so Tourism Ucluelet as a whole, you know, without trying to preserve what makes our community so special, it really is our goal to share it with the right people so they understand why we love being here as much as we do. And without having that beautiful surrounding, we can't have the lovely community that we do have. And this is really why we live here. So it's just knowing that that is the intent of what Tourism Ucluelet aims to achieve, is to make sure that we work towards finding that balance so everybody can thrive. And with that, what can I say?
Thank you so much, Denise, and thank you for your 10 years of dedication to Tourism Ucluelet. It's been quite a journey, and I'm just I'm thrilled that you're staying in the community, and best wishes in your new position with the Ministry of Tourism.
Thank you very much. And without all of those individuals listed up there, Tourism Ucluelet really would not have gotten to the point of that it has reached over its inception of starting with the chamber to being a fully independent association as we operate now. And I really can't thank everybody enough, including, like I said, Anthony and his team at 4VI, not just for taking on this contract to support us, but they've really been supportive over the years in just helping us understand our place within the community, within this ecosystem of tourism. Tourism Tofino and their staff, we work very closely together, and we really do have a great relationship with them. Parks Canada as well. And starting with the Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce, it has always been very important for Tourism Ucluelet to maintain those relationships. And then, of course, the District of the District of Ucluelet staff and council, it really has been past and present. Without that relationship, again, we would not be where we are today. And the businesses within Ucluelet and Tofino, it really has been amazing to watch everybody grow and flourish over the years and just building those relationships. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I've been able to do for the last 10 years, of course, without my board of directors and the staff. So
Thank you, Denise. Any questions for Denise from council? I think they're going to give you a break. You can sit down. It's funny. I'm on a group of resort municipality mayors, and we had a Zoom meeting this morning. There's 14 of us. There were 10 of us, I think, at this morning's meeting, and except for Tofino and Ucluelet, they're pretty much all ski resorts. So they're all just getting ramped up, and they're so excited that they have snow, and they're so excited that their resorts are just opening, and it's like, wow, you could throw a bowling ball down Main Street today. So it's really funny just to see how different communities appreciate the fact that they are a resort municipality, and how they embrace that, which we have done as well. So thank you. Is there any unfinished business? Seeing none, we have 6 report items, including a late item. Since the agenda was reordered, the first report item is Peninsula Road Construction Contract Authorization. This report will be presented by the Director of Engineering Services. Welcome, Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. I have 2 reports for you this evening. And the first report that I have in front of you and on your agenda is asking for council's consideration of a contract to construct phase 1 of Peninsula Road Safety and Revitalization.
Is your mic on? It doesn't sound like it's on.
Is that better?
That's way better, thank you.
So just this first report that I have in front of you is asking for council's consideration of a contract to construct phase 1 of Peninsula Road Safety and Revitalization. Important to note, the public can always access useful information for the project on the district website, including most relevant plans, stakeholder engagements, and schedules. Most recently in October, district staff invited area contractors to provide tenders via BC bids for that construction contract. 5 companies provided tenders. Each was reviewed for completeness, availability, experience, reputation, and price. Of the 5, Hazelwood Construction Services provided the best value tender and is the recommended winner of the construction contract for Peninsula Road Phase 1. Hazelwood Construction Services has 30 years of construction experience similar to our project. They have an operation on the West Coast here and are available to begin this project. They have a manageable timeline in their proposal and tender of a substantial completion of May 31st, 2024. They've also provided the lowest price of all tenders of $2.6 million, which is within our available construction budget. They're also a staff that we've worked closely with, most recently on the Village Green project here in Ucluelet, and we have relationships with them. We appreciate their quality and care of work and their professionalism. If approved, the contractor could start as soon as mid to late January on the construction project. They're proposing a 20-week construction schedule. Again, they would close around end of May 2024. If approved and prior to construction, the contractor is required to complete a comprehensive schedule outlining all their areas of activities and affected people during construction, a traffic management plan, as well as a communications plan. Communications on this project would be a joint effort between the district, consultants, and contractor. The district would publish and post on its regular venues all of the construction schedules and notifications to inform residents of construction activities, and the contractor would use more ground forces, such as ground, road signage, and notifications to those affected businesses during construction. I have 3 unresolved items on this project, Council, for your review and consideration that affect this project that I'd like to share. The first is about contaminated soils and the potential effect on this project. During procurement with contractors, it came to our attention that landfills were suddenly refusing materials that were recently understood as, or newly understood as contaminated, and landfills were refusing material and sending it off to Duke Point. The Environmental Protection Act and regulation that controls contaminated soils changed in 2021, and it really showed up at landfills in October of 2023 during our procurement. Our project is planning for the removal of tons of material, tons of soils from Peninsula Road to be disposed of. All of our material has been tested for contaminants along Peninsula Road, and 50% of it has been determined to be just slightly above the acceptable criteria for the regulation for naturally occurring metals and materials. So this presents essentially about an $800,000 liability and risk to our project, which we weren't previously planning for. In the weeks ahead, we're working through implications of this new requirement with engineers and environmentalists from McElhaney Engineering and other professionals. We have a request in with the ACRD and the West Coast Landfill to better understand how they're going to be responding to this new requirement and how it could affect our project. We're hoping to hear back from them in the weeks ahead. We're also preparing and mobilizing right now to do more testing on Peninsula Road, more core sampling, to further refine our understanding of exactly what is contaminated on a more narrow basis, and it'll inform our mitigation strategy, what soil goes where, and how we can reduce those costs. Council, you can anticipate a report in the new year, first thing in the new year, that outlines our strategy for mitigation and how we're going to be solving that and reducing that cost and that risk as low as we can possibly go. That report will outline, again, our strategy, any implications that we discover in the next couple of weeks throughout Christmas, and any changes to the 2024 budget proposed. Item number 2 on your agenda, or on your in this report to discuss, is the timeline from our grant. The Canadian Communities Revitalization Fund has a completion date of March 31st, 2024. Vancouver Island's asphalt industry is closed during the winter, and it presents a really serious challenge for our paving project during the winter in this current time. So given the circumstances with the inability to purchase paving when we need it in the winter months, and the project progress and where we will be in the new year, potentially, we believe it's going to be a reasonable request for our grant funders to provide another small extension, perhaps 2 to 3 months, to our project. So we must put in an extension to our grant funders, and we'll be doing that in the weeks ahead. The third unresolved item here is we've continued to have conversations with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to have the Peninsula Road paved in the near and dovetailed to the Boulevard project, or as close to as feasible. There's quality, real quality opportunities there, as close as we can get the Boulevard works and the paving projects together. So most recently, MODI has confirmed with the district that it has allocated budget in its 2024 budget to come and pave and resurface portions of Peninsula Road in 2024. When I say portions, they're planning to pave on top of our phase 1 project. So staff will be considering this approach in the months ahead and returning to council with a report in the new year about Peninsula Road paving. So just to summarize that and provide potential next steps, what we're asking for here is authorization to begin on the construction project. What we're doing right away is core sampling to better understand what the impact of that risk is. That will help inform next steps. If awarded today, Hazelwood Construction would start the administrative part of their project. They would start setting up financing and bonding, scheduling, all the logistics needed over the Christmas month to be ready for mobilizing in mid to late January. And then again, returning to council with a report prior to construction. So with that said, I guess that's it, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. And when you refer to phase 1 of this project, it's the section between Seaplane Base Road and Bay Street, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. Any questions for Mr. McIntosh? Councillor Mafty?
Through the mayor, this is a stupid question, but it's a $800,000 question. You say that roughly 50% of the soil is slightly above the contaminant threshold, but presumably the other 50% is not. And so hypothetically speaking, if that soil were consolidated into one unit, it would presumably total under the threshold.
Through the mayor, you've exactly nailed our strategy with the ACRD and
I'm alarmed
West
because
Coast
I
Landfill.
prefaced that by saying this is a stupid question, so I'm hoping it wasn't that stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. So our request and what we're looking to build on is a request that they accept all of our tonnage on a statistical average across the entire project scope. And in that case, for where we've tested above the threshold in 10 spots on Peninsula Road would actually be below the threshold. So we're waiting to hear back from them if they will accept a bulk order. And in that case, we'd be reducing that risk, that $800,000, quite significantly.
It's interesting. I had a West Coast Committee meeting yesterday morning in Tofino, and I brought this up because there was representation there for the landfill, and they said if the soil was diluted so that the parts per million were less than what is considered contaminated, that they probably would take it. But you wait to hear it from the horse's mouth for sure.
Of course, it's great news. It's wind in our sails, and we'll just keep moving forward with our strategy, hoping for the best.
Perfect. Any other questions? Councillor Anderson?
I think it's naturally occurring contaminants. Is that right? Is that it's not like there was something that contaminated the soil? It's actually naturally occurring. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes. So we tested 10 core samples along Peninsula Road for about 75 different metals, materials, synthetic material, as well as hydrocarbons. And so, yes, there were about two markers, naturally occurring arsenic and naturally occurring copper, where we were just slightly above the threshold in 5 of those 10 samples.
I feel like we should get this done before the threshold goes even higher. Thank you.
Councillor Hoare, anything from you?
No, other than I'm like, oh, we have blue clay. Oh, copper. Can't say I'm surprised.
So the this $800,000 risk, let's say the worst case scenario happens and we're looking for $800,000, where's that going to come from?
Through the mayor. So, couple of ideas here that we're going to be just working through in the weeks ahead and coming to council with our report. The first is that we have a contingency in our project. It's about $300,000 that could be allocated to this. And then, as well, as mentioned, we'll be working at reducing this as much as we can. So we're really hoping it's not $800,000. And then, but to your point, if it's absolutely worst case scenario, we'll come to council in the new year with a budget update and a request for additional funds in a way that we've allocated and planned for.
And what if council decided that that was not feasible for us? What would happen to the project, and what would be, you know, the losses, and what our commitment is to this project? Because, you know, if we authorize this, I feel like there's almost no going back. We're talking about essentially 30% of the overall budget as an unknown, which seems a bit high, you know, as far as a risk factor to take. And I just, is there any way we can get a more firmed up number, or a little bit more reassurance that we're not just approving something and then being brought something that we can't refuse at a point where we've gone to a point of no return?
Yeah, through the mayor, certainly we've discussed this, and it is a very significant risk. We're the way that we're thinking this through is that the storm line is failed. It's beyond its useful life, and it's deteriorating asphalt on the Peninsula Road shoulder. So that system has to be replaced. We're well into it now, and if the cost of excavating this project is that expensive, we would propose to council a couple of options that we felt, you know, for your consideration, that would address this in an acceptable manner. I don't know. Dwayne, do you have anything to share?
Sure, Mayor, if I may. So one of the challenges that we face is that with the failing stormwater system, it needs to be replaced. It's not really an option. And all of the material that is going to be replaced, or the lion's share of it, is from the replacement of the storm system. That's the excavation part with the contaminated soil. So if we didn't move forward with the project, it would result in the above ground project also being delayed, and that's contingent on the grant. Now, the grant has already been extended 1 year by the federal government, and they said don't ask again. They were very clear that the extension of the grant was not something that they wanted to do last year when we asked for that extension, but they did give it. So if we delay it or even remove that component out of the project work, all the above ground infrastructure would be deferred, and we would likely not be able to access that grant money. So it would reduce the project cost, but it would also increase the cost significantly and not mitigate the risk of the contaminated soil. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. We have a failed stormwater system, has to be replaced. That is where the liability lies, and it does put us in a position where, how do we fund this if we have to? Now, we do have reserve funds within our budget, and it would need to be contemplated against all the other competing capital interests going into the 2024 and beyond budget. So there is an element of risk there. Absolutely, we acknowledge this, and that's why we wanted to bring this to council in advance to ensure that council is fully aware of the implications. And the reason that we're proposing to award the contract now is to make sure that we still capture that grant, because if we don't, we're going to lose that opportunity to benefit from the linkage of the grant-funded project, the paving project from Modi. They'll come in eventually and pave regardless, obviously, and then the stormwater component of it. So there's a lot of things that are all mingling here, and this is another aspect of that project. So we'll be working as hard as we can to mitigate this risk as much as possible, but it's a risk that is going to be there no matter what we do. So even if we stop as soon as that stormwater system fails, which it's already failing, there's holes in the roadway, we're going to have to start digging that up, and there's your liability again. So it just doesn't go away, unfortunately. It's something that we're going to have to deal with regardless.
Are there any portions of the project that the fund that could potentially take the risk? So the risk is no longer $800,000 to the taxpayer; it's $800,000 in landscaping or special curbs, and allocating all the funds to the critical infrastructure and holding off on the nice to haves.
Right. So I guess to answer that is, so the risk is in the contaminated soil. That is funded by $500,000 from the Ministry of Transportation, an allocation from our from the British Columbia Growing Communities Fund, that one-off we received last winter. The above ground is not transferable. So if we don't pay our portion of that grant funding, then we lose out on that grant funding. So you can't pull the $750,000 for the above ground and allocate it to the contaminated soil to mitigate that. And once you dig up the location where the storm system is, you're also damaging all the above ground finishes. So if you don't refinish it, you're left with an open area that is unfinished. So all of the boulevard up against where that storm system is will be disturbed, and now you're going to either leave it as a disturbed site, or you have to pay to finish it.
Okay, now I'll ask a stupid question since we're on stupid questions. Presumably we're going to be digging a hole, taking the dirt away, and bringing in dirt to fill the hole again. Why are we not using the same dirt?
Through the mayor. So what we're doing is we have it's sort of a cut and fill operation, and what we're cutting to add larger pipe, and essentially to add larger pipe equals tons of material that have to be removed from the site. And the material that's coming out is really it's a highway standard, and so once it comes out of the ground, it's very unsuitable for use in modern highway construction. And so what we've looked at is a couple of options, included can we remove this material from district property to other district property in an acceptable manner, and that's proving to be a bit more complicated and administratively challenging than we would have liked. So at the end of the day, the material to install a new storm pipe has left over unusable, now contaminated material that is really just only suited for the appropriate landfill.
I knew it was a stupid question. Thanks.
I thought that was an option to move that contaminated soil to another place that the district owns, like maybe out by the cemetery or something.
It's something that we've been just investigating thoroughly with environmentalists from McElhaney in the last couple of weeks, and it's proving to be problematic with the new regulation. Again, something that could have been feasible in years past, and now is becoming a challenge. So we were working through that option and hoping that it could at least offset some of our strategy. But it's looking, we'll continue to pursue that with environmentalists, but it's looking to be not a feasible option for us to pursue at this point.
One other question, since you mentioned taxpayers' money. The chart on page 57, it looks like the sources of funding for this is Ministry of Transportation, Canadian Communities Revitalization Fund, gas tax. What portion of this project would be funded by taxpayers' money? I guess I'm looking at our CAO for that answer.
So currently, we have $1 million from gas tax, which needs to be used for transportation corridors. There is $83,000 that we contributed, and another 1.040 that we contributed as well. Now, part of that second million is the growing communities contribution that we received in the fall. So it's considered district funds, but it is actually a grant that has been allocated to the municipalities back in February of this year.
And presumably the 800,000, there's no grant funding for that, so that would be community contribution as well.
It would be. Now, we have not spent the entirety of that. And forgive me, I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think it was about $1.4 million that we received from that one-time grant from the province in the spring. So right now, I'd have to go back into the budget log to see how much. I think it was about $600,000 that we allocated to this project. James is nodding. So there is theoretically another $800,000 from that, but we were reallocating that to other projects such as the Bay water line to Hitatsu that we need to replace. So it's kind of just moving that money around as to where we want to allocate it.
All right.
Can I just ask one quick question through the mayor? Sure. You mentioned that you were trying to determine if the landfill would accept either a statistical average or diluted soil. What's the timeline on getting a definitive answer from them?
Through the mayor. So the person that has that answer is on vacation right now, and we expect them to be coming back next week. As well, next week we're starting additional core sampling. So those two parallel processes, engagements with the proper person at the ACRD, who's the manager director responsible for that landfill, is coming back. And by that time, we'll also have a better understanding of exactly how much we'd be asking to bring that's above that threshold.
A follow-up general question, and maybe this is something directed at my fellow councillors and the mayor here. Is this maybe something that we should defer? I feel like this is a fairly significant, $800,000 is not nothing, and when it's clear where that money's going to come from, if it does have to be spent, it might be worthwhile getting a little bit more certainty about the decision. And if we're talking about a few weeks here, we don't have to wait months to get these answers. And I feel like it would put us in a better position to make a considered decision. It's not 80 grand. That's a lot of money.
This is our last council meeting of the year, unfortunately. So that would delay it until mid-January.
Is that technically feasible with your timeline?
So through the mayor, it's certainly an option that we would integrate with council's direction. It does create some challenges with the grant, for example, and also the construction schedule that's trying to mobilize for January to get done in May. So that certainly creates some difficulties. What we were planning to do or hoping to do is to do these core sampling in the next week or two, get the results, have the engagement with the ACRD and with council's authorization, not yet approve that contract right away. We could sit on it for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks perhaps, and just give Hazelwood sort of an informal understanding that we're moving in a certain direction, but not yet sign the contract and notice the award, and wait until we get back all of the information that we need to make a real full decision. With everything that we have so far, it's aiming towards risk mitigation and a reduction of that value, and something that we can afford with contingency or other district funds. So we're feeling okay about that, but we just wanted to bring this risk to council for consideration.
Thank you. I think that makes sense. I guess then my final follow-up question here is, right now the matter before us is to vote on whether or not to authorize the contract. So if what you're suggesting is that we could, give a good faith indication that pending a workable solution, we'd go through with it. Is this a resolution that could be amended to reflect that? Because I feel like at this point, what's in front of us is either, let's sign it and it's a done deal, or we can decline that. We can vote against that, or if there's a third option here, it would require a modification or an amendment.
Okay, can I just take a moment?
Yeah, maybe Joey could amend.
I wonder what the timing is. I'm not trying to create a huge storm here. No, the only thing I was worried about is that Canadian Communities Revitalization Fund, like that, and because that's one of the cons for if we say no, we could lose on that. But I don't know what the timing is on that. Maybe a couple weeks, isn't it?
If our hands are tied, our hands are tied. I hate, like, that's $800,000 is an unknown on a project.
Okay, do we have a third choice?
Madam Mayor, thank you. I'll just leave it with you at this point to lead and direct.
I'm wondering if there could be a third option rather than A or B. Could we have a C that authorizes the contract pending a solution to the contaminated soil? Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess one of there's always an option. We can defer the award of the contract. There is risks that then come with that and delays pushing the project out into the summer, and we need to work with Hazelwood to make sure that they still can do the contract. So it could have multiple implications. The other thing to consider is that we still have the risk and we still need to do the stormwater system, and that's where the liability is. It's not going to go away. And there's no, we'll do everything that we can to mitigate that risk, including dilution of the materials so that the landfills can hit it. But if it comes back saying, no, we can't do that, that risk is still there. It still needs to be dealt with. It's not going away. It's going to come back to council and saying, okay, it's 300, it's 500, it's 800, and we still need to deal with it because we have a storm system that has failed. And I believe if council recalls doing the tour back about a year ago, they saw the underground storm system leading out into the small craft harbor, and what was left of it. That's what we're dealing with. So now if we don't fix that, we have another liability issue because we're not addressing a known problem in the community underneath our primary transportation corridor. So it's I know this is a difficult one to council. We could defer and bring it back to council in January, or defer pending an allotment that council is comfortable with. But it's just going to keep coming back saying, here's the price. What do you want to do?
Just through the mayor, just so I'm not potentially creating more of a problem with my comments. How would this affect much needed development that's coming our way? It relies on the sewer system.
Well, this isn't sewer. This is storm.
Or sorry, storm.
Storm system. So, essentially, what could happen is when the system continually fails, that we do continued maintenance on it, or a truck rolls down the highway and goes through the highway. To be blunt, for development wise, I don't think it has an impact on sanitary and water supply, so it won't affect development in that manner, but it will affect transportation corridor, and now we're doing emergency repairs, and everybody knows with emergency repairs, double the number. So we can either plan for it and work through it, even though this is a very significant risk that we're presenting to council. By not addressing it, we're increasing that risk and liability because we might have to do it on the fly. And as soon as we do that, We still have the contaminated soil. We have to do the paving on top of the repair, which is what Modi's going to pay for. So not moving forward with it increases our liability significantly the farther out we delay. So there's no good news here moving forward. And yeah.
Right, I'm pleased through this discussion that at least it's on the public record as to how important it is. So it's not trying to throw the project under the bus here. It's just making sure that everybody knows that if we have an $800,000 risk, that we're doing it for good reason and we're not just up here going, yeah, sure, do it. Yeah.
I would add in there, so right now, and I know this is not the avenue that we would intend to or would like to use these funds for. So currently we have a significant amount of funds within the Barclay Community Forest. We haven't touched them, and I know absolutely, and I agree completely, this is not what we intended Barclay Community Forest funds for. But there are $3.3 million of unallocated funds in there. There's a portion that was considered for the rec hall at this point in time that does have an allocation. There's a possibility that we could borrow against the Barclay Community Forest Fund to utilize as this risk to deal with it. So there are funds available. It wouldn't necessarily impact directly a tax requisition going into 2024. But it's something for council to consider. We do have funds. They are there. It's not where you want to use those funds, obviously. We could borrow against ourselves, which is something that we can do, and we would just collect funds to pay that Barclay Community Forest back for the intended use in the future. So it's not like we're going in there and going to have to kibosh every single other capital project if the worst case scenario comes to fruition.
Thank you.
And just for the record, this project will be under the bus. It'll just be much safer. So there is a recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
I would move the council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute a $2,698,533 plus GST contract to Hazelwood Construction Services for the construction of the Peninsula Road Safety and Revitalization Project.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Any further discussion?
I'd only add that I'm obviously not against this project. I'm just trying to be a voice for fiscal responsibility, and I think that if we do end up in what I think we can all agree is a worst case scenario, I'm hoping that there'd be opportunity to discuss how we could mitigate that. And as Councillor Kennington suggested, maybe there are factors baked into the original design that we could forego in order to diminish the impact of this unexpected expense, assuming that there isn't an easy way out of this with the landfill. So,
Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
The second report item is 6.2, Consultant Contract Authorization for Development Coast Cost Charges Program Review and Update. This report is one of the late items and presented by Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report is to ask for council's consideration for a contract to have our development cost charges program and bylaw updated. Development cost charges are monies collected from developers by district, imposed by bylaw to finance new roads, drainage, storm systems, water, parkland, and other amenities coming to us in the new DCC and development legislation. The district's DCC bylaw 738 was approved in 1996. It's out of date and creating liability for the district. The program, bylaw, and fees require an update. The update will ensure that the district is taking in the correct fees to proactively manage sustainable growth. And with the completion of the OCP recently and all of our infrastructure master plans, including the storm, water, and sewer master plan, and with new housing legislation and development on the horizon here in district, the time for this update is timely. It's now. In November, the district invited consultants to provide proposals for the update, for the review and update of the development cost charges program and bylaw. We issued a request for proposals on BC bids. The district received 2 proposals from that open competition, and Urban Systems provided the best value proposal and is the recommended winner for the update. Urban Systems has the experience necessary to do that work, and they've done similar development cost charge program updates in over 50 communities in BC. We also have a working relationship with Urban Systems, and they've also provided the best price for the 2 proposals that we've received. And lastly, they provided a reasonable timeline to complete this project. It could take up to 1 year to review and update our DCC program. Their base price is $78,905,000 to complete the review and update. Once we include additional options that we feel are valuable, such as preparing the district for amenity contribution charges and other legislation changes coming to the district and development community, that contract totals $90,000. To finance the update, the district originally allocated $18,500, which is a difference of $71,500. Originally, the district, we were just planning for a small bylaw update, and it's become clear in recent months that a full review is necessary given the impending legislation change and development that's on the horizon. So pros and cons available in your agenda, Council. So if we were to award the contract today or now, what we do is begin working with the consultant right away and aiming for about a 10-month turnaround on this bylaw update. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Any questions? I'm seeing none. There is a recommendation. Oh, Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Sorry, in the recommendations, is it the first one is to release the funds and the second one is where it comes from? Is that correct? Is it the second one is the reserve, is that it comes from the development cost charge reserves? Is that?
Through the Mayor, the first recommendation is to authorize the contract.
Right.
And then the second recommendation is to allocate $90,000 in the 2024 budget.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And I believe they should be moved separately.
I just have one technical question. So the first motion here, then, is it worded correctly to reflect that the final value of the contract is going to be $90,000? Because if we're authorizing a contract for $78,905 and that's only the first installment, then you're going to have to come back to get permission to pay them the rest, because it's actually a $90,000 contract, right?
Through the Mayor. Just one moment, please.
Not to supersede you, but just for everyone else's, in the analysis of options, it says implications contract base value is $78,905 plus GST. Additional option deliverables are $11,095, resulting in a final contract value of $90,000 plus GST. So that $11,095 is a second installment, which itself is going to have tax on top of it.
Sorry. Thank you, Council. Yes, that is an error. It should state that it should be up to a $90,000 contract to reflect that additional funds needed for it. So the reason that we would add up to is because we have the base 78, and then we would allow for an additional $12,000 that we would utilize for those additional costs or negotiated pieces.
So that's in the second motion, the up to 90,000.
It would need to be in the first one as well, because it would be, we're executing a contract for the base plus another 12,000 up to the 90. So we'd negotiate that last little $12,000 because we need pricing on those two pieces of the accessory cost charges, which haven't, we need to talk to them about it.
So in the first motion, it will be to execute up to a 90,000 plus GST.
Correct.
That's right.
Okay. Shall I make the motion? I'll move that council authorize the corporate officer to execute up to $90,000 plus GST contract to Urban Systems Limited to review and update the development cost charges program and bylaw.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. And I'll further move that council direct staff to allocate up to $90,000 plus GST in the 2024 budget for the review and update of the development cost charges program and bylaw funded through development cost charge reserves.
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Moving on to 6.3, the report item titled Lot 13 BC Housing Partnering Agreement. This report will be presented by our Director of Community Planning, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. There we are. This evening we have a few reports that are really various land agreements that come out of prior development approvals of, rezonings and development permits, and then the work starts again in the background. And so this is the first of them, and I'll give a little brief overview of Lot 13, sort of where it came from, because the rezoning application and development permit that were sort of the precursor to this was done in the previous council term. And so Lot 13 Marine Drive, as it's called or referred to, was, I think, in 2005 designated as it would be this lot that was to be used for affordable housing, and there was a covenant that was put on the property. It was part of the Ocean West approvals and rezoning in that area of the district. And some 4 years ago, Andrew McLean came forward and had a rezoning application for the property to change what had originally been sort of put in the covenant, but to really partner with BC Housing to do an affordable home ownership and rental project under BC Housing's AHOP program. The Affordable Home Ownership Program is sort of the financing mechanism. So on the screen there is the proposed subdivision in form. It's, as I think most folks are aware, it is a small lot, single family subdivision. It would be fee simple. It's not a strata or anything like that. Manufactured homes, essentially, that would be placed on very small lots. And the AHOP program with BC Housing is an interesting program where it really captures some cost support from the municipality, from the developer, and also from BC Housing, and it puts them into a sort of second mortgage that BC Housing puts in to lower the price tag for qualifying purchasers. And so, as it says in the report, there was a contribution that council has committed $650,000 total from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund towards the project, and that is sort of leveraged through this program. So it's just about $1.1 million in cost savings to the purchasers of the units. So it's about $45,000 to $65,000 per home that they're reducing the price tag for the qualifying purchaser. So that all brings us to, and so that was that program, that project was approved by the BC Housing Board in late June. And then we had some discussions like, okay, there's a couple of agreements that need to be in place between the municipality and BC Housing, and there's one that involves the developer and owner of the property. And we have currently a memorandum of understanding with BC Housing that started with this rezoning 4 years ago. And so in June, when the project got board approval, we said, let's see a template of that agreement with BC Housing. And they passed it along. We looked at it, and our lawyers looked at it and said, well, we'll draft our own agreement. So that's what's in your package. It covers the transfer of money from the district to BC Housing as part of backing up the financing of this, but also spells out in the future as the units sell, if and when those units were to sell and that second mortgage is paid off, the funding comes back to the district. So we're essentially, the municipality supports the project to the tune of $650,000, and the full $1.1 million worth of second mortgages would come back into our affordable housing reserve, so that as BC Housing has set it up, the money stays in the community to support affordable housing long term. And so that's essentially what that first agreement is about, is really sort of that relationship between the district, BC Housing, and our affordable housing reserve fund and the movement of funds. And then the second agreement is the project agreement, which is more involves the developers, is named in that. It has a lot of clauses that are between BC Housing and the developer, but one of the key things I think is it defines what is a qualifying household that is consistent with what had been brought forward. That this is really for up to middle income, which they define in the. I'm not sure if I'm looking for a pointer. I don't think. Well, okay, between the red lines, the red horizontal lines on the screen, I'll just try and verbally describe it here. That really, it's looking at what they define middle income is below the 75th percentile of gross household income within UCLILIT. So that's the upper red line. So and the numbers shifted slightly because of this is 2020 and now we are in 2023. Incomes have changed a bit, but so for this project, $119,000 is the maximum household income, and that's for the largest of the units and the most expensive of the units. So that's sort of like the absolute cap for a qualifying household under the BC Housing for this project. And the lower red line is really, effectively what would you need to make as a household in order to qualify for a mortgage for one of these units, which range, the purchase is $300,000 to $400,000 for the actual, price tag for the qualifying buyer. So that's really what those middle income, that band is for the UCLILIT households. And so in a nutshell, that's I guess how this is meant to work. Part of the arrangement, as we understand, BC Housing required that pre-sales be completed for 22 units, which we understand is done, that they are accepted, qualified, authorized purchasers. And the details of sort of who qualifies are in, I want to say it's Schedule 6 of the agreement in the agenda. And it really is defining as well, in order to be a qualified purchaser, you have to have, for a couple of years lived on the West Coast, worked or be retired from working on the West Coast, and not own other real estate, and that sort of thing. So there's some basic criteria which were again brought forward as part of the rezoning. Say who should be accessing this housing. So it doesn't say specifically UCLILIT residents, but West Coast residents. So working in Tofino or UCLILIT, understanding you have households who work in both places or move between both communities, working for the park, for local First Nations. All of that would qualify as that sort of qualifying purchaser. So those pieces essentially are all now in these agreements, which have been partly, as I said, the one agreement was written by our lawyers back in July. In November, we received the second agreement finally from BC Housing. It's had all parties and their lawyers look at them, and essentially what we're looking for is authorization to actually execute those agreements, and that would, we understand, enable Mr. McLean to access the funding from BC Housing so that he can then move forward with the engineering and construction of all the services to complete the subdivision, so that we can get to the point of, has to go through subdivision approval, create those 33 lots, and then he can build foundations and bring in 33 homes. That's maybe a lot to digest, but there's a lot of details in there, but essentially this is, I think, a very positive step in seeing this move forward. So if there are any questions of council, I'll
try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. We've all been anticipating this for some time now. Any questions from council? I think we're pretty well versed with this project. There are two recommendations, and they should be moved separately.
I've got this. I will move that council authorize execution of the Affordable Home Ownership Program partnering agreement between the district and the British Columbia Housing Management Commission for funding contribution in conjunction with the BC Housing Affordable Home Ownership Program.
I'll second that.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. That carries.
I will also move that council authorize execution of the project partnering agreement for the 33-unit development at Lot 13 Marine Drive between the district, the British Columbia Housing Management Commission, ACMC Holdings Limited, and Andrew Charles McLean.
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Thank you. Yay. The next report item is 6.4, the cabins at Terrace Beach, license of occupation for trail occupancy and S.219 covenant. Again, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, through the mayor. Council, I think, has seen various versions of this. So there, as you'll recall, as part of the rezoning and development permit application for the construction of the new cabins, now at the cabins at Terrace Beach, there was a couple of things were offered by the property owners. One in blue at the bottom of the screen there was some road dedication, which is complete. They gave that land over to widen what's known as Seabridge Way. So there is a little sliver of district land there. And then also, as part of the approvals, they agreed to a restrictive covenant, which set out a number of conditions which they had authorized. And the timing of that was to be prior to occupancy on the new cabins. And there have been some unexpected delays where essentially the owners have done everything they need to do to provide this statutory right-of-way, the subdivision, which would clean up the fragments of parcels that are there. It's all ready to go, but it got hung up on the fact that there's a piece of the statutory right-of-way for a public trail which overlaps a little bit of provincial crown land, which was the result, that's that highlighted in yellow, little sliver of result of a subdivision in, I think, 1997 of the Reef Point, or 99 in the Reef Point area, where they reverted a watercourse to crown land, which was a bit of an unexpected wrinkle. So the district back in April applied to the province for a crown land tenure application to authorize a statutory right-of-way to overlap that little piece of crown land. And we're finally in contact with some of the folks in the province because it has, initially, it was last time we talked to council, there'd been a delay because it was really lands and forests through the ministries, and during the summer there's so many people who were really sent off to deal with the wildfire situation that they were really behind in looking at these applications. And so in recent weeks we've been in contact with them, and they are looking at it. It is not complete, and we're getting very close to the point where the last cabins are ready for occupancy. And so in discussions with the province, they felt that a license of occupation over that little yellow sliver would be something they could approve with much less process than having the statutory right-of-way overlap it. The end effect for the district in operating a public trail, it really makes no difference. So what we're seeking authorization for is to enter into that license of occupation, and hopefully the subdivision can move quicker and essentially not wait for the provincial, the difference is it needn't wait necessarily for provincial sign-off before they can register the subdivision, dedicate the right-of-way, satisfy the conditions in their covenant, and we can give them an occupancy permit on their last cabins. So I hope that made sense. And we're essentially just looking to keep this thing moving and dealing with provincial ministries, which takes patience.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Any questions for Mr. Gregg? It's pretty straightforward. There is...
I do have one.
Oh, Councillor Hoare.
and this one is actually from last night's meeting. And it's just confirming so that this will mean that the Wild Pacific Trail will be able to go all the way along Terrace Beach and then all the way up to Peninsula Road without any problems, without trespassing on any private property once this is done.
Through the mayor, yes. Without it being registered, today that existing trail that's out at the north end of Terrace Beach, which many people are familiar, walking up that trail and walking on the old alignment of Peninsula Road, that's all trespassing, and that we don't have a right-of-way to make that connection. What the owners of the property had offered was to provide a statutory right-of-way to enable the trail, so it could be truly a public trail, and the Wild Pacific Trail could connect, but also connect through the woods to Peninsula Road by the Spring Cove Trail and make a really good loop of that trail. And the other piece that's part of this, as you'll recall, is that the owners had, in discussions with the Ukulithat government, offered the Midden parcel in the middle will be transferred to Ukulithat ownership as an indigenously owned park parcel as a result of this, but the subdivision has to be completed before that can happen. So it's all these dominoes lined up in this little piece with the province is sort of sitting there in the middle of it.
There's always a red tape somewhere. I just wanted that on the record that it
they'll
was
make it.
a complete trail, basically. This would make it a complete trail.
Would you like to make the motion?
I am happy to make this motion. I will move that council authorize the District of Ucluelet's corporate officer to execute a license of occupation with the province of British Columbia for that portion of the Terrace Beach Trail overlapping the area of Crown Land which intersects the trail's statutory right-of-way EPP 117266.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you, Mr. Gregg.
Another one that it's nice to get off the books.
Yes.
That was such an odd one. Such an odd little slice.
The next report item is 6.5, Retail Cannabis Sales License Application for Unit Number 5, 250 Main Street, also presented by Mr. Gregg.
Through the mayor, there's not a lot to present. Council is familiar with this one because it did come forward as a temporary use permit to authorize the land use previously, which was authorized. But there's a step of licensing with the province for the cannabis retail license, which does require municipal notification and a motion of support from council. The notification has been completed, and Mr. Rotenberg, maybe we can confirm. I don't believe we've received any correspondence.
We have not.
And so the notification was seeking written input on the license. So I think essentially now council is in a position to, having done the notification, to make a motion and make a decision on a recommendation for the license.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. So there is a recommendation. If someone would like to move that.
I'll move that council, having given notice to gather the views of nearby residents and in consideration of the general impact of the proposed store on the community and nearby residents and businesses, recommend that the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch issue a cannabis retail store license for unit number 5250 Main Street, Ucluelet, BC to 1181569 BC Limited.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. The final report item is 6.6, 221 Monado Road, Park Dedication, License of Occupation, and Covenant Amendment. This report was moved from 6.2 to 6.6 at the beginning of our meeting. I move that the meeting be closed to the public in order to address agenda items under Section 90, brackets 1, brackets E of the Community Charter, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. This is not the end of the meeting, but the meeting is closed to the public, so we can discuss this. And yes. Oh, and a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare seconds. All in favor? None opposed. That carries.
We only wanted to make everybody move.
The meeting is now closed to the public. Our YouTube and Zoom broadcasts will be restarted when this meeting is reopened to the public.
Not for this portion, but we'll invite you